That's okay. I need to apologize in advance here. I'm home with two sick kids, so if I get interrupted.
Oh, sorry.
That's fine. We're used to that, and I think we've all become much more tolerant over the past few years.
Well,
Are you still with us there, Zach?
We lost him.
oops, I didn't kick him. Looks like maybe his Zoom crashed.
Okay.
Just trying to change the view.
Just gonna ask that. Is he in the kingdom?
He's not in the
Kingdom in?
He's in Groton on Route 302.
Oh, yeah.
He's about a mile west of the center.
Okay.
Is that Emerson Logan?
Affirmative.
Oh, that's how you knew.
I know.
I'm like, what's going on over here?
Stalker.
Stop sloggers.
So we're still live, and Zach, are you back?
Yes.
All right, there's a reason why I cut trees for a living.
All right, well,
Back.
yeah, good morning. If you want to introduce yourself, we would be very happy to introduce ourselves quickly as well, but why don't you go first?
All right, yeah. My name's Zach Emerson. I own a company, Emerson and Sons Logging, based out of Groton, Vermont. I've got 5 employees, and I run a mechanized timber harvesting operation.
Okay, good. I'm David Durfee. I don't know if you can see us well here at the end of the table. I represent Shaftesbury and Glastonbury and Sunderland down in Bennington County. And we'll just go around the room.
Rodney Graham, I represent Orange 3, which is Williamstown and Chelsea.
Jed Lipsky, Lamoille 1, represents Stowe. And in full disclosure, I'm interact with Emerson Logging, and I've gone to seminars in your shop in Groton, and I just want to say that publicly.
Henry Pearl, represent the towns of Danville, Peacham, and Cabot.
And I'm David Templeman. I represent Brownington, Barton, and Westmore.
Josie Levitt, Grandel Chittenden, Grandel County, and West Milton.
John O'Brien, represent Royalton and Tunbridge.
Esme Cole, Windsor 6, Hartford.
Heather Supnot, Windsor 4, Barnard, Pomfret, and Bridgewater.
Okay, and we've got Alora over here in the corner, who I think must have spoken or contacted you earlier, and then Representative Rice may be joining us. But why don't you go ahead and get started, Zach, if there's anything you'd like to say.
Yeah, so the right to repair bill, this would be a game changer for my business. And one example I'd like to give you guys is, we do all our own repairs that we can, and dealing with the dealerships themselves costs us a great deal of money. The hourly labor rate's $190 an hour, and one of the manufacturers whose equipment I run is Tiger Cat Equipment out of their Canadian company, and the closest dealer is 5 hours away. So, if I break down, I need to call them. Not only are they 5 hours away, but I've got to make an appointment with them, and it could be weeks. So my downtime could be really long, and typically a season that I can't be down in. So having these technical tools at my fingertips would be greatly helpful.
Thank you. Committee questions? Henry.
I guess I'm wondering, Zach, in the past, have you tried to access these tools before, or have you asked or tried to purchase them and they're not available, or just what's your experience been in that realm?
Yeah, it's always kind of been my understanding that they weren't available. I have tried more specifically with our trucks to get the software and have been rejected with Mac. So I've certainly tried, but I don't believe any of this is available to just, someone like me.
Dave.
So Zach, if access to repair were made available as a right, as statute. I'm sorry, I'll look at the camera over here. And if that meant a higher price initially when you purchase equipment, would you be willing to make that extra investment?
100% yes.
Thank you.
Other questions? Jed?
Yeah, Zach, Jed here. I know you have Tiger Cat. Do you have any, what are American piece of equipment in your woods fleet?
I guess I'd have to look up where they're all manufactured for sure, but I'd say John Deere might be my only.
Yeah, and do you reckon that Tiger Cat has refused to get you any diagnostic equipment?
I can't say that they have refused. Like I said, I never, I didn't want to assume that was available to me, but, it's just always been my assumption that I've always had to go through the dealer whenever there's been an issue.
So my follow-up question, one dealer comes to mind over in Boonville, New York. I don't know if they're the closest to Groton or not, but have you ever approached them for diagnostic equipment to purchase it through them?
No, I have not, but that is the dealer that I go through.
That's Tiger Cat.
Well, they have Komatsu, they have a lot of equipment they represent, but Tiger Cat, I was in their yard a few summers ago, and Tiger Cat's a very high quality North American manufacturer, state of the art forestry manufacturer. But that issue is to be supportive of Zach's concern. I have to say that I spoke with a construction company in my town, Daly Percy, last night, and they have virtually bought those diagnostic devices from every manufacturer that they own. They said, like Emerson and Sons, they're qualified and they have a shop, and they depend on doing their own repair. But that's why access or legislative access to this diagnostic equipment is really, I think, what's at stake for independent contractors, whether they're ag, forestry, it's the same bucket. So that's why I'm focusing my questions on the ability to access that equipment.
Any other questions? All right, Zach, thank you. Is this a day in the woods?
Typically, yes. My crew is working today. So luckily I've got enough wood down on the ground to allow me time here with the kids.
All right, well, thanks again, and we'll let you get back to them. And we appreciate your time this morning.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye now. Okay, so I don't think we have anybody, do we have anyone else?
So we don't have anyone else right now, but I did just get an email about 6 minutes ago from David Hall, and if he wanted to come in now, I think he's available.
Okay, all right. Well, good. We should take advantage of that. Yeah, so just to be clear, I don't know honestly what is going to happen today regarding this bill. We're not going to be here all day working on it. I might try and get a sense just going around the table at some point of how people are feeling about it. But yesterday, some people, I'm looking down at the end of the table, suggested they might be able to put some thought overnight into some language changes. I don't know whether haven't had a chance to talk to anybody this morning to see what we might have.
Does
But
council even have time to make those changes, or will we sort of advance the bill within a?
that's what they're here for. So what I thought we might want to do is have somebody come in, and I didn't expect it would be David, but since he's around and is the attorney of record, I guess, for the bill, have him come in and let's go through, because we didn't really do this, go through the bill line by line, essentially, and see whether because I think we've spent enough time with it now that we know where we've got some concerns, where we think there's some ambiguity. Let's just see if we have those folks who have an interest in making this bill better anyway. Let's do that. That's something we haven't had a chance to do. So we can, how long will it be before David's available?
I'm working on that.
Okay.
Hopefully soon.
Okay. So why don't we go offline till he comes back? You can stay here, stretch, if you want to pull the bill up, look through it, make some notes, whatever.
Can we just chat about some reflections of things?
If we could do that instead, yes. Yeah, we should stay online if we're going to do that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That was my next question.
Did you want to?
Well, it just, I made reference within the last 36 hours of the catastrophic safety issues with working on large logging equipment, and that we had seminars on advanced logger safety, and Emerson's did host at their shop in Groton, and there were loggers from all Vermont, maybe some from New Hampshire, where we had, very in-depth training and this about that, tag in, tag out, with very graphic descriptions of and PowerPoint type stuff. So they're a small company, father and son and family. They're very professional operators. I didn't know what to expect I didn't realize until it came on screen that, he's a friend of mine, or we've been to half a dozen seminars together. They're very professional. But I just want to say, he's no, activist. He's no industrial mouthpiece. He's just someone who's works hard, successfully, very professional, and feels it'd be hugely valuable.
Yeah.
And the real question is, which is why I asked, has he ever asked Tiger Cat, can I purchase this? Chip Percy, who I spoke to last night for 45 minutes, said and they're a big construction company, mostly dirt and earth and, 20 dump trucks, all sorts of it. He said, we have those computer plug-in things for virtually everything we own. We won't buy a piece of equipment without buying that. What do they cost? $2-3 grand. So it wouldn't matter. It's critical to us to keep functioning.
So but they have to buy them from the dealer.
They buy them from the dealer. They don't bemoan the fact that they're not expecting for free. Nothing's for free,
Yeah, so last night I was trying to construct in my mind a way to organize how the industry is looking at this, not this bill, but just this profit model that they have. So what we spoke out in the hall was that it appears that they took the repair access portion of their product and separated it into a what's the word? It's used in economics a lot, where you create a derivative. They created a derivative product, and by doing that, we're able to save the client money in the initial purchase of the vehicle. So they, if it's $2,000 or $3,000, that derivative product then is separated from the vehicle. And then that vehicle or machinery is available to the consumer at a lower price. However, they've given up their access to repair, making it, where the dealership is the single point of repair access, thereby maintaining the relationship with the customer over a long period of time, which, pays off for the dealership because then you're the return customer, right? And I can see how that model works well for the industry. The question is, does it work well or poorly for the customer? And I think that's really the question here. And there are cases, not all cases, but there are some cases where it doesn't work well for the customer. And I think that's what we're trying to address. And I know you all already know these things, but I'm trying to put it in words that are, for me, it's helpful to understand it in these words, like seeing that access as a derivative product. I think that's kind of it.
And David can confirm this, and I could pull it up, and we could, any of us could, but it's in Title 9 of the Vermont statute, which is consumer protection, where this would be housed. So, Henry?
That we keep hearing this narrative of access being such an issue for this diagnostics or this tool essentially that allows you to fix your machine, and yet we've only heard one solid example, and I don't even know if it was that solid, of somebody that bought a piece of equipment from John Deere that wasn't a John Deere piece of equipment. It was obviously a new line of equipment, and they were not prepared to get that information to them. But like in the case of what we just heard, he was assuming that he couldn't get the equipment, but didn't. And it's very possible that it's accessible. With John Deere, we've heard that with the other person that spoke, they have never tried to get the John Deere equipment. We've got written testimony that came in from Gladstone's that says they have got the equipment. And I'm having a little trouble with that narrative of like, people can't get this.
It's not that they can't get it, it's that they have to pay for it.
Why wouldn't they
Pay for everything.
They have to pay for it, but they can only buy it from one source, so there's no price competition. Right. I think that's the right.
I would just push back on that a little bit by saying, if this isn't a problem, why are the manufacturers fighting so hard against it?
It's not a problem.
But
Why make a law if something that's not a problem?
well, I would argue that if a product is available from only one source, that's a problem for consumers.
Are you then suggesting that John Deere tractors be sold by other people? And that at John Deere, I don't quite understand your argument. I mean, it's like buying a Fiat at a Ford dealership.
Well, often that does happen, and we heard an example of.
Rodney's got a question here, comment.
So your opinion is that every third-party mechanical shop should have access to this knowledge? I mean, there's software.
My belief is that
Please.
we should, that it would be a consumer protection to say these technologies, software part, whatever, the pieces that are in the bill, shouldn't only be available from one source that has a contractual agreement with the manufacturer. That there should be options.
You should be able to go to AutoZone and buy this diagnosis.
I don't know if that's what the market, if that's what the market played, if that's what happened, then that would be.
So we're not doing this to protect the farm.
Well, the consumers in this case are the farmers. It's the same.
So why don't we've got David Hall here. And David, we're hoping that we might use your colleagues today, and if we have you for the next half hour, that's we can sort of see where we are. But we've had some time just over the past couple of days to look at the bill. We've gotten testimony. It might be helpful just to go back to the top and go through more on a line by line or section by section basis and see whether there's any language that we feel might need some particular attention if this bill were to move forward. So
Can I just?
Sure. Yeah.
So we just heard about a logger talking about his log trucks back. So I'm wondering, some big Vermont dairy farms own trucks. Loggers, I wasn't really thinking about that. They have a lot of logger operations on their own trucks, right? So do those fall under this bill? Like, when you're talking about like tractor trailers, do some fall into a category of ag and forestry, or are they all sort of under a different agency of transportation department running vehicles, EPA type?
So what would David Hall, Legislative Counsel, for your record, what governs the applicability of this chapter is what's in this bill. And so, a device, part of a device, or an attachment to a device designed to be used principally for an agricultural purpose. So is a milk truck meet that definition? Maybe. I don't know. I don't know the answer.
So it's helpful that that's the very first line of the bill. So let's before we go any I mean, that's great question, actually. Just a second. We're on page 2, like line 8, and the first definite. So remember the bill's got a whole bunch of definitions. Stuck there in the middle is fair, the fair and reasonable. But this one should be a little easier. Maybe it's not. Agriculture equipment means, et cetera, et cetera. And does milk truck fall possibly into the description? And do we want it to include milk trucks? And John?
Or logging trucks.
Or logging trucks, yeah. Jen?
I can possibly help counsel or this committee by reflecting on how you register your equipment determines there are ag plates. I have a 33-year-old truck that has ag plates. Log trucks that are leaving the premises, going a certain mileage down the road to bring product to other places, from a landing to a mill, or from an ag truck can carry haylage or silage from one farm, lease farm, could be 15 miles away, back to their farm. They are carrying ag plates. But a milk truck that's going to Agrimart from multiple farms cannot run on an ag plate. They have to have
Just thinking that we also heard the distinction this morning earlier, on-road versus off-road. If we talk here just about off-road.
No, an ag plate can be used off-road, but it's got to be from a farm unit to a farm unit that's connected in farm.
Are there other statutory definitions of agricultural?
There's like
20 million.
Of agricultural equipment. I'm sorry I started answering before you finished.
I certainly know that there are of agriculture.
So I don't know if there's other definitions of agricultural equipment. I'm not sure. And while I certainly acknowledge there's different ways we carve up the world into what is and is not agriculture, unless you change this language, those things don't really matter. because agriculture for Act 250 is different than agriculture for regulation, it's different for labeling requirements, is different for pick a use. Just like, the word business means different things in different contexts. So what matters for the applicability of this chapter is this definition. And with this, the scope is extremely broad and frankly vague. It can be tightened, or you can leave it vague intentionally because you want to cast a broad net. But I would say for the moment, the way that it's written, it's a very broad definition, and it is not clear, is a milk truck designed to be used principally for an agricultural purpose? Probably, sure. What else do you use it for? So I would say yes, but is that what we have in mind, or do we really mean like the baler? So I don't know.
So as an example of a way that you might easily, if we decided a milk truck was a step too far, we could insert on farm into that, right? And say on farm agricultural purpose. Most of what a milk truck does is off farm, and so it would pretty clearly not fit into that definition, whereas a baler would.
Or use the off-road term. Although not all off-road things are agricultural.
So where does a logging truck fit then?
Well, this is just
That's in
agriculture.
the logging
So,
section.
so there is a separate definition for, yeah.
What about a riding mower that people use? Are you going to start parsing it and say, okay, I haul sod in my riding mower? Does that count under this? Even though it's designed to be a mower, but I have an attachment and a cart and I, take my plants in it. This is a really vague definition. And, Rodney's not now join me in the world ahead of
Well, usage came up, right?
Right, and I could see people saying, well, I am using it for agricultural use, but I'm not mowing my lawn. It's
That's landscaping.
it's a tiny piece of ag equipment for,
On Church Street, put an orange triangle on the back of it.
I putted to my neighbors on it because he can fix it for me.
But that's what we're doing. We're doing the work of what should be included and excluded right now.
Right, so I'm asking, are riding mowers going to be included because they can be used for agricultural purposes?
All right,
And
let's,
that's not included in this.
good. So Henry, want to jump in?
Yeah, to that point, David, what is the correlation between defining a farm vehicle and having to be a farmer? Like as far as if, can just anybody use a vehicle as a piece of farm equipment if they're not already established under the guidelines as a farmer or owning a farm?
I hear your question, but it's actually, it's governed by other law for other purposes.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So who is a farmer for purposes of a grant program that seeks to, invest in working lands is different than who is a farmer for tax purposes or for Act 250. Those are all different in their own contexts, and they're not, at this point, even addressed in this bill. This relates to the equipment and whether or not it's designed principally for an agricultural purpose. That's the criterion right there.
I don't know. We haven't taken testimony, and I don't happen to know whether a lawn tractor like a John Deere tractor that you buy at a dealer or at Home Depot can be repaired anywhere, or whether you need, special software. I don't know.
Mine certainly doesn't need special software.
Yeah. So, that would be another area but I don't think that's what we've been thinking about.
It doesn't feel like the intent, but this is a really vague paragraph. So I'm just playing devil's advocate of what else fits under this, because this is super broad.
All right, so let's flag that it needs a little more attention anyway. We've had a couple of ideas. I think somewhere in what we've just heard, there's probably the answer, but we don't need to nail it down right now. Unless anybody wants to keep talking about definition 1, we can go on to 2.
Well, agricultural purpose seems to be the phrase that actually makes it super vague.
Okay, yeah.
What is that?
Authorized repair provider. I'm not gonna read it line by line, but we can all look at it and see if something jumps out. Any red flags there? No, okay. So we all know what that's talking about.
Can you, I hate to interrupt you, but if you could let me read the second sentence. Yeah, so that's another place historically that I've had the extraterritoriality concern where the OEM is its own authorized repair provider. And if it's located out of state, and then we're purporting to require that they comply with, our law and they're an out-of-state entity, that's where that concern comes up.
Out of country.
Or out of country.
Yeah. So if so this language, how applicable is this language to the reality of Vermont?
I have no idea.
Yeah, I'm asking the group in case there's.
We're still talking about number 2, authorized.
The second sentence, I think you're talking about starts on line 20. David, is that?
Yep.
Page 2. Yeah.
I guess the concern there, especially in the forestry industry, we've heard that the majority of the businesses or dealerships that provide equipment for users in the state of Vermont are not in the state of Vermont.
Right.
Is that is where they kind of pose. So if you buy a piece of equipment from, let's use the example we had earlier of the place in New York, the Tiger Cat, if you buy a piece of equipment from there, does our law, when established as it's written, require that cover the authorized repair provider in other states, or is it just in Vermont?
So that's the issue. That's the problem, right? We can't export our laws to other states. So how does that manifest? You've got the manufacturer who does its own repairs. So if something breaks, you have to send it to them. And then they send it back. I mean, you could argue that transaction is happening in Vermont, and therefore, I don't know how that shakes out. Honestly, I don't know the answer.
So the second sentence here then describes, I think, a manufacturer who doesn't work with affiliated dealers.
Right.
And it does its own repair work. I'm wondering whether that even, if it's not the way things are in Vermont, how it helps us to have it here and whether it's necessary. Particularly given the concerns that you raised, David.
The other place that comes up too is, when we're talking about fair and reasonable and having parity between the authorized repair provider relative to independents and individuals. And when we're talking about what is fair and reasonable, what is their cost, sort of changes that dynamic a little bit. But, the prevalence in the real world, I have no idea.
Yeah.
So
why don't we flag that second sentence as possibly removable?
Just one
Good,
more
yeah,
question.
John.
Probably for you guys. Are there essentially used car dealers in the ag and forestry world who aren't really, affiliated with John Deere or
Absolutely.
whatever? And how would they fit into this? Do they become authorized?
well, they're independent repair providers.
Right.
So they're
But they buy and sell and serve.
But you're talking about selling the equipment?
Right.
Oh.
Like a used car dealership
Oh, just from the,
That might have a garage, you take your,
Ah.
whatever vehicle there, they can fix it.
well, the repair work is one issue, the selling is the other. Are you talking about repairing or selling?
I'm saying, I go to, I wanna buy a skidder, I go to a lot that has 6 different brands of skidders, all used, I buy one. They do fixes on skidders, are they?
Right, so unless they have the authorized relationship, then they're an independent repair provider. And the whole purpose of this bill is to make sure that, or require that they have access to all the tools and information they need to fix that equipment. So they're the whole point, that and the individual.
I could request from them to get this diagnostic stuff too. Maybe Potentially, like they could.
Well, if this bill passes, sure, yeah. No, they could ask, or you could ask if you're the owner, then yes.
Just, I want to stick with the language. Is it a question about section?
Pardon me. It's really, no, it's about John O'Brien's point
All
of
right.
what exists on the market.
So, I mean, yes, I think there are independent repair dealers that may, I mean, there are dealers selling used equipment that may have an affiliation also. I guess we don't know that for sure. Okay, good. But selling used equipment, repairing.
So if they have the affiliation, then they're authorized, then they're the people who are the sort of the bar, the standard for what this bill will require to be made available to people who are not affiliated, right? So that's a critical distinction between authorized versus independent.
Okay, let's look at the next definition, 3.
That seems pretty clear.
Yeah, I don't think anybody has pointed to this as being confusing or concerning.
So in the quick second I had before I came up here, I saw that New York in December adopted a right to repair law that goes in effect in July. I haven't had a chance to read it, but from what I saw, it did not include security codes and passwords. This definition does, so I think that's gonna require more work to understand the scope because it's a much narrower law than what was originally sought. But that on line 5 is something that, catches.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, let's flag that. Henry?
I had a question in that in section 3 on documentation. Does this allow the information on how to essentially make, like it kind of goes back to this line of questions we had a minute ago about the equipment being available through other distributors or manufacturers? Does this allow there's talk about trade secrets or whatever, but would this language allow for all the information needed for someone else to manufacture the software or device that hooks up to the piece of equipment?
In the real world, I have no idea. But any manual, diagram, reporting output, service code description, schematic diagram, security code, password, or other guidance or information used in affecting the services of diagnosis, maintenance, or repair. So where do we draw that line? The owner or the independent repair shop keeps asking for more stuff. What happens? I don't know. Do we reach some sort of an impasse where the manufacturer says, you don't need that to make the repair, and the independent says, yes, I do?
Right.
And then what happens? I don't know. We have a crisis, and then is there litigation? Does the AG get involved? I have no idea. How far does that go? I don't know. I know that that's one of the concerns, the one you're articulating, that I have heard articulated in testimony. I don't have a realistic appraisal of how big of a risk it is.
So when we, later down, when we come to the requirements section and we see the words, documentation, we see the words that we're looking at the definitions for now, then I think it'll be important to go back and say, oh, okay, well, let's remember that we had this question about documentation. Okay, now we come to fair and reasonable terms. We do definitely have some questions about this definition. I'm wondering, it's going to take us more than 10 minutes to go through this section, but
Who's defining that? I mean, from whose perspective are they saying fair and reasonable to a farmer might not be fair and reasonable to John Deere? So how do we define that? And then in section, the one right below that for parts, costs that are fair to both parties, again, we're not defining what fair is. I mean, I think we'd like to know, you'd like to think it's reasonable and that they're not being charged a $3,000 or 3,000% increase on something. But then the manufacturer might say, well, that's fair to us, but that's not fair to the farmer. So how do we, I don't know how fair and reasonable seems pretty vague. It's a great idea in concept, but I don't know how you quantify it.
So I think just sort of stepping back here, section 4 here, part 4, is an attempt to define fair and reasonable terms. So this is part 4 here. We're going to define fair and reasonable terms. Then it gets into the section, what you were just reading there, Josie, which gets a little murky. For parts, it means costs are fair to both parties. So you're using fair to help define fair, which I think is a little bit of a problem. But in any case, I think you make a good point. How do we reconcile fairness in this context?
And then skipping ahead, also just, and I'm just going to, these are my last things with cost. On page 4, line 7, costs, this is for tools, costs are equivalent to the lowest actual cost.
Well, let's not get there yet.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
But yeah. So that's a different thing. So let's just stick with parts and go through that. Welcome other comments. Representative Cole.
I just feel like this particular wording has definitely been used in other legislation before, like it's not random. So I think referring to that might inform our decision and how we try to further define it. And maybe not even just in Vermont, but beyond in other national legislation.
So in other words, other states have taken up this legislation? Is that what you mean?
Well, I'm just speaking very specifically to the fair and reasonable price determination piece, whether, no matter what it's about, having not anything to do with ag equipment.
Okay. Maybe David can help with that.
I mean, it does go back to the 1800s, and they use the same terms on reasonable and just when farmers were battling against unfair shipping costs from railroads, saying that it favored corporations.
Right.
And that was what the farmers were saying, was that you needed fair and reasonable terms. So from the original Interstate Commerce Act.
Well,
Wow.
There's that. So yeah, thanks.
It's History Friday.
I'd also like to see something written in that fair and reasonable to everyone, because I can see, I don't know about you, but I've gone to the car dealer, had something fixed, and someone else has gone to the car dealer, and we've all paid slightly different prices.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes that can figure in, and I think fair and reasonable for everybody and everyone's charged the same amount. And they're not thinking, oh, this guy can afford more, this guy can afford less. I don't know. I worry about that.
There's basically 3 ways you can do this. You can say you have to charge the same price that you're charging to your authorized repair provider, or you have to say that price plus what, either a reasonable profit or 6%, 8%, 10%, I don't know, pick a number. Limit the markup. Or you leave it like it is and it's up to the parties. And then when, again, we come to an impasse, there's a resolution. And whether that is negotiation, mediation, litigation, enforcement, I don't know. But there's, the problem is not the word so much as the mechanism.
So on line 12, we've got costs are fair to both parties, which is it possibly ambiguous, possibly is, there's historical.
Maybe I can rephrase those to help you with your debate. It's either objective A, objective B, or subjective. And this right now is the subjective.
Okay.
I have a question that I guess can ask. Do you know if companies are legally obligated to support things they've made in perpetuity? I mean, it's so much today connected to the Jasper Hill story. If there's a dealer that says, well, that's a manure injector, we no longer make those. Or our company sold, spun off that sub-company that used to make a specific piece of machinery now, and you're bringing it to us. So how does that work? Because in the real world, it seems to happen a lot.
I think you're out of luck, or I don't know. I mean, like I said, there's no precedent for saying, forever you need to support equipment that you've made, I guess. Not that I'm aware of. I don't know.
David, does the second sentence there, fair and reasonable costs are subject to statutory and regulatory limitations, help?
I don't think it adds anything. I don't know what it means. And at worst, it's a tautology. If they're already subject to statutory and regulatory limitations, then they're subject to statutory and regulatory limitations. It doesn't add anything to say that here. So I had that flagged. I would strike it. I don't know what it means.
Okay, good.
For the record, I thought it sounded good.
Maybe that's why it's in there. Somebody else thought it was good. All right, so, maybe this is a good place to stop. Otherwise, we'll be stopping in the middle, I think, of a particular definition. So, Dave, I don't know if we'll have you available later or not, but
Sometime.
At some point we'll.
I mean, I don't know how late you want to stay today, but.
We've already decided not past 4.
He shows up at 4 every day.
Yeah.
Before we're leaving.
That's when you go to work, I guess.
My schedule is, I'm booked until at least 2:30. I don't know how much more than that I'll need. I'm not sure. It's these 3 other bills.
We'll see where we are, and thank you.